Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay. Wow. So sorry. the the thing just went off. I was just able to connect now. Okay, we're almost done. Can you see my screen, or do I need to reshare it? Can you see my screen?
We can see it.
Can see your face, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hold on, please. Let me go back to where I can control the screen. Hold on, please. I'm still with you. I have to rerun the. Hold on, please. Okay, I can see the slide now. I'm trying to reshare the screen. Okay, I have to close this. I'll share. Okay, I can see it now. All right. I also believe you can see my slide now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So so I was talking about communication on a network, on a local area network. Okay. So now I've already established the fact that each computer on this network already have an IP address because they are part of the network. So what happens is that if this computer, let me show my laser point. If this computer over here wants to communicate with another computer, let's say this one over here. So what happens is that there is a communication protocol, okay? The protocol is the agreed way, okay? The protocol is the agreed way of communication, of how communication should take place on a network. And that protocol is called the TCP/IP protocol. Now, we're not going to be going into details into that. This is not a networking course, but just to mention it to explain how communication takes place on a local area network. So the TCP/IP protocol, enforces a law that before any computer can be able to communicate with any other computer on the network, the IP address of the destination of both the source computer and the destination computer must be known. Okay? So what happens is that when a message is generated from this computer and is sent from this computer via a web browser or through enemies, okay? But let's assume since we are looking at the web application, software now. So let's say through a web browser, you are able to type in, let's say, the URL of the website you want to visit, let's say google.com. So once you press enter, okay, the browser transmits that information out of this, out of this computer. Now, since we are talking about a local area network now, don't let me use Google. Let me just use an application. Maybe you developed a website recently on your computer, and your computer is part of this network, and you want every other user on this network to view the website you have created. So what you need to do is that you after you have copied the website into this computer, or since you developed this website, or the website on this computer, it's already be on this computer. So all you need to do is to give the IP address of this computer to every other computer on the network. Okay. So every other computer on the network now needs to open, like the user of these other computers need to open their browser and type in the IP address of this computer that has the web application installed. Okay. Now don't forget that because they are on a network, they all have an IP address. Okay. So once you type in the IP address of the computer hosting or carrying the website file that you want others to see, once you send it to them and once they type it into their browser, then automatically the browser sends an information over the network and connects to the computer that has the website. Okay, then the website can immediately, or the what's it called? This other computer can immediately send back the website file to this computer so that they can view the website that is on it. You understand? So now this simple explanation of how a web application can be accessed on a local area network is exactly the same way it happens on a wide area network. Okay, now don't forget what I said earlier. The only difference between a local area network and a wide area network is the size. It is the size. So it is the same way communication takes place on the internet, because the internet is an example of a wide area network. You understand? So that is exactly what happens. Now, don't forget that on a local area network, as you can see in this diagram, we have a big computer in the middle. Now, this big computer is called the server. Okay, then every other computer on the network, they are called the clients. Okay, and I explained earlier that whenever a resource is to be shared on a network, that resource is usually transferred to the server for easy management and also for security purpose. Okay, now the reason for that is that even though a computer, so even though a computer or every computer that are on the same network, they can actually access each other. Okay, I can view all the files on another computer on the same network. But because of security, it is not actually advisable to let that happen. So that is the reason why it is usually advised that rather than every computer accessing each or one another's file, it is better to connect every computer to a single server. So the server will now be the one to do the job of sharing the files amongst the computers. Now, this is to ensure that there's security and there's no breach of information on each of the computers. You understand? So which means in the local area network of like 10 computers, you can have one server. Okay, but as the local area network is getting big and big, let's say the computers on the local area network is increasing from 10 computers to like 50 computers. In that kind of situation, one server might not be able, to handle the load of file sharing or resource sharing. So what happens is that network engineers usually now increase the number of servers on the network. Okay, so in that kind of network where we have 50 computers, the number of servers can be increased from 1 to like 5, so that maybe one server can serve like up to like 10 computers. Okay, so which means if we have up to like 5 servers on a network with 50 computers, okay, now can you now imagine the number of servers you can have on the internet, okay, that has over hundreds of millions of computers? Can you imagine the number of servers that will be on the internet? Okay, so I mean, we'll have close to maybe hundreds of millions. If you have like 500 million computers on the internet, okay, we can possibly have maybe 100 million. Okay, we can possibly have 100 million. What's it called? We can possibly have 100 million servers on the internet. You understand? So that is exactly the structure of the internet and what happens on the internet. You understand? Can you still hear me? I need the feedback to know you are still following me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now on this kind of internet, let's say this is an example. This wide area network is the internet I'm referring to. Okay, and let's say there are about 100 million servers to serve other client computers on the internet. Okay, so the same analogy I gave earlier, the same thing, the same explanation I gave of what happens within a local area network is exactly the same thing that happens on the internet. Okay, so which means If I have a website, so which brings us to the next thing. If we have a website, okay, maybe I've developed a website locally on my computer, and I want the whole world to see my website, okay? If the website remains on my computer, I'm the only one that will be able to see it, right? But for the whole world of other people that are on the same network, that are on the same wide area network to be able to see my website, what would I do to be able to make that possible? I need someone to answer this question. What am I going to do if I want people all over the world to see, or if I want to share my website with every other person on the wide area network or on the internet? What will I have to do?
You host it on a server.
Very good. You host it on a server, okay? Just the same way you will do on a local area network. If you want this other person or other people on the local area network to see your website or to see a file on your computer, you send it to the server so that the server is not the one that will give other computers access to the file. So it is exactly the same thing that happens on the internet. So that is the importance of servers on the internet. Servers are very, very, very important on the internet. You understand? So that is the thing that now brings us to web hosting. Now I'm not going to be showing the slides for the remaining part. I'm just going to explain it because the slide is not, complete, and also to uh, not to waste time too much. I'm going to be explaining it, in detail. Later on, you'll be getting the slides. So which brings us to web hosting. Now let me go back a bit to the local area network again. Don't forget I said that for all the computers on the local area network to be able to see the website that is on this computer, first, this computer must send the website to the server, okay? Then other computers must now get the IP address. They must get the IP address of the server and enter the IP address on the browser within that computer. So once they type in the IP address, then they will be able to see the website on that browser. The IP address, the server will be able to serve them the web application on their own browser locally. You understand? So, and I said it is the same thing that happens on the internet. But how come that whenever you want to visit a website like google.com or facebook.com, you don't get to type the IP address of the server on which Facebook was hosted on? Because that is exactly the same thing everybody does, even Facebook or Google. In order for them to, publish their website to the whole world to see, of course, they have to package the website from whichever computer it was developed on. They have to save it or send it to a server computer on the internet. Okay? But the only thing is that on the internet, as a user, if you want to visit Google, you don't type in the IP address. You don't type in 192.168.0.1. Rather, you type in a URL, something called a URL that is sensible, that can be easily remembered. Okay, something like google.com, or what we call domain name. Okay, you use a domain name to access a particular website on a server on the internet, rather than using IP address. Now, the reason for that is very straightforward and intuitive. It's basically because if that same thing that happens on the local area network, if that same principle, is brought to the internet, it's going to become very difficult for people to remember, the IP addresses of servers. Because like I said, there are hundreds of millions of servers on the internet, and websites and web applications and files can be stored on any of the hundreds of millions of servers on the internet. Okay, so how many server IP addresses do you want to remember as a user who wants to access a website or an application on the internet or on a particular server on the internet? It's going to be very practically impossible for you to remember even up to 10 IP addresses. Okay, so because of that, so there's those who manage the internet, they came up with an idea, okay, that instead of actually accessing servers via IP addresses the way you could in the local area network. So they came up with, an application software on the server. Now, don't forget earlier that I told you that a web application has what we call the backend, and it also have what we call the front end. And I said at the backend, there are different kind of servers. Let me show you that image. This particular image here, we saw that there are different kinds of servers at the backend. Okay, we have the database, we have the cache server, we have the backend server. Okay, now these databases, now don't confuse them now. This server we are talking about here, I'm not referring to the hardware server, because we have a server that is the hardware. We also have certain softwares that are installed on the server hardware. They are also referred to as server softwares. So just like you have the server hardware, we also have server softwares. And server softwares are softwares that run on the server. Okay, so there are different softwares that can run on the server. Okay, but most of them are called server softwares. Because there are many, each of them also have their unique names. But collectively, they are called server softwares, or softwares that run on a server. You understand? So, yes, we're going to be getting the recording. Someone just asked that now. You'll be getting the recording. You'll get the link after now. Okay, so now, as part of the softwares that are installed at the backend, that is on the computer server at the backend, there's a particular software that is called the DNS. Okay, that is the domain name server. DNS, domain name server. Let me go back to this place. It's called the domain name server. Let me write it here. Okay, let me just go ahead. So what the domain name server does is that in order to properly manage the remembrance of server names on the internet, okay, so they came up with unique names that are easy to remember on the internet called domain names. Okay, so those domain names must be registered. So there's a central body that is handling or managing the domain name registrations all over the world. And that body also ensures that no two server or no two computers can have the same domain name. It must be unique. Okay. So instead of people having to remember IP addresses or numbers whenever they want to communicate with the server, like you would in a local area network, all you need to do is first you register a domain name, then that domain name is now attached to a particular server. Okay, so we now have the domain name system or the domain name server, okay, called the DNS, which maps a domain name to an IP address. So what happens whenever you type google.com on your browser is that when you press enter, the server or the browser submits the request and sends the request to the server, okay, which is hosting the web application. So the moment the web server receives the domain name of the website, okay, it checks through the domain name system, okay, for the list of domain names that have been registered on that server, okay, it checks it. So if that domain name has been registered on that server, on that server's domain name system, then the server will now map the domain name to the particular IP address, okay, where the application has been installed on. You understand? So at the end of the day, when you are typing google.com, that google.com is being converted by the domain name system at the back end, that is on the server computer. It is being translated to an IP address. Then that IP address is now what the server will use to pick the resource, whether it's a file or a web application, and now use it to display the application, the appropriate application to the user. Okay, so that is exactly how communication takes place on the internet. So each time you are typing Google or Facebook.com on your browser, that is exactly what is taking place. the browser is sending the request to the server on which facebook.com was hosted on. Then once the server gets the domain name, it converts it to an IP address. Then the server now uses the IP address to locate, the appropriate file to load, to pick and send back to the user's browser. You understand? So that is exactly what happens on the internet. So it's very important you know this as a software developer, because by the time you have written your web application or your website, okay, the next thing for you now is how to make the website accessible publicly, okay, by everybody all over the world. So you have to understand how to, get a server, okay, and how to register your website and host or deploy your website or your web application to a server on the internet. Okay. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is, so how do I get a server? How do I register my website on a particular server after I finish developing it? Okay, so the answer to that is that just like we have internet service providers who connect you to satellite service providers, so that you can be able to have access to satellite signals to transmit your data over the phone, okay, or on the internet. We also have people who are called web hosting companies. Now, these web hosting companies, their job is to ensure that they provide server for people to use on the internet. Okay, so what they do is that they provide servers, configure the servers, and don't forget, servers are just like client computers too. There's actually no difference between a client computer and a server computer. A server computer is just a computer, just like every other computer. The only difference between a server computer and a client computer is that a server computer is dedicated for the purpose of serving the client computers. Although you can also use a server computer to do the same thing you do on client computers. You understand? You can use a server computer to do the same thing. But the only thing is that a client computer, a server computer is usually reserved for that purpose and that purpose alone. You understand? So, but it's just like a computer. So what they do is that they provide this computer, they set it up, they configure all the necessary software, domain name system and all that, and they put it on the internet. So you now have to pay them. So they sell space to you. They sell disk space to you, add disk space to you for you to upload your files. Okay? So what happens is that when you go to and there are several of them, all over the world. We have some in Nigeria, we have some in the US. Here at Zara Technologies, we also do hosting, we also sell hosting space to other people who want to host their internet or their website. So what happens is that when you pay a hosting company, you pay for different disk space sizes. Okay? So for example, there are different prices for maybe 1 gig. If you want to buy 1 gig hard disk space, there's a different price for it. You can buy 5 gig, you can buy 10 gig, depending on the file or the size of your website. Okay? So once you have made the payment, then they will give you the space, then they give you the username and password that you can use to log into the server computer. Then they give you a folder, like a folder space on that server computer that you can now upload your files into. Okay? So once you've done that, then your website will be live, active. So this is just to introduce you to web hosting and all that. By the time you started developing websites, properly, all those things will be introduced better to you. But this is just by way of introduction. You understand? So, this is where I am going to be ending the class. We've pretty much covered almost everything about the agenda. I'm trying to go back to the agenda to see what next. So, we've treated introduction to computer networking. We've treated demystifying the internet and how it works. We've looked at web servers overviews. Introduction to web apps and languages you need to learn. We've already looked at this earlier on. Okay? So this is exactly where the class ends. Now, the next step for you now is to get into introduction to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like I said at the beginning. Then also to introduce to you the tools you need to start developing web apps. So So that is the next step for you. At this point in time, we've been able to treat everything we've been able to introduce you to coding 101 and introduction to coding. Okay, we've seen all the important things that you need to know, before you start learning a programming language. So the next thing for you now is to start, learning the actual syntaxes, okay, of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, while you are learning these syntaxes, there are other principles you are going to be learning alongside this, okay? But at the point you have right now, with the knowledge you have now, you are actually safe, okay? You are ready, you have been prepared to actually begin, your career in coding, starting from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like I said earlier, these are the 3 programming languages of the web, which we recommend that everyone starts from, okay? So, but the scope of this coding 101 introduction to coding does not, it does not enter into this in the particular course, introduction to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, So at this point, before I move further, let me just quickly get a feedback, concerning, I know a lot of people have dropped off because they will be waiting for the video, they will want to watch the video later, and some add other engagement, because of after the 2 hours, after we're still the 2 hours. So I really want to appreciate you guys that were able to stay behind to complete the class, to complete the lecture. But before I move on to the next important thing I want to show you, I would like to get a feedback. You can unmute now, any question, any other question you want to ask, anything you want to know at all, if there's still anything confusing in the whole course, please feel free to ask this question now. Anyone? Are we still there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Just to be sure I'm not talking to myself.
We are here, sir.
Okay. So does anybody have any feedback? Question? You understood everything I said? So since nobody is answering, I want to believe that you understood everything about the internet and how to demystify the internet. Demystify the internet and how it works, and other stuffs like that. Okay. So, but I want to quickly bring up something to show us the next part. From now, as you are now, you've actually been trained to the point where you can kickstart your career in coding, and it's actually very, very easy to start coding right now from everything you have learned. Hold on, please. Let me. Okay. I'm trying to show us a picture.
I'm sorry, while you do that, sir, I just have one thought that I've been thinking about since yesterday.
Okay.
Is coding different from programming? Because I
Okay.
tried checking on the internet and I'm seeing like one source specifically said it is an unending debate.
So it's actually, I think I mentioned this when I started yesterday. The debate, there's a lot of debate that goes on, in the IT world. Especially the software industry. Some of them actually make sense, while some of them don't make sense. Okay, but generally, sorry, I'm trying to go back to the slide. Hold on. So generally, coding, as far as I'm concerned, coding and programming are actually the same thing. Why are people debating on such things? People don't need to debate on such things. Coding and programming are the same. And I also said software development, coding, and programming, you can use them interchangeably. Although, if you look at it deeply, there's no way, there will be some slight differences. Just like we looked at, what's it called? Just like when we looked at websites and web applications, is there a difference between websites and web applications? Okay, we saw that there was a difference, but you know, it's a very slight difference. Now, the reason why it was important to bring out the difference between website and web application is because it could be very confusing, especially for communication purposes. Now, one of the important things in software, especially in the software industry, is communication, because there are a lot of technical words, so it is very, very difficult to actually communicate very well. You know, when you're in the office, you are developing a website, and you tell somebody, now we are trying to address your team, and you tell them, now we want to develop a website. Okay, so normally somebody might be thinking, you might actually be referring to a web application, but that information might actually make the person you are talking to think you are talking about a website. Okay, so because of such kind of confusion, you know, it was important to bring that kind of clear difference. So that one is generally agreed, although there's been a lot of debate around that too. But has been generally agreed that, okay, there's a difference between website and web application. You understand? But things like programming language, coding, I know why some people might be thinking there's actually a difference between the two, you know, because not even between coding and programming. To me, coding and programming are the same thing. But software development and coding, or software development and programming, well, I can say there's a slight difference. But software development is actually beyond, is more than coding. Software development does not even necessarily have to do with coding. You understand? You can develop a software solution without writing a single code, as long as the solution solves the problem you're trying to solve. You know, you don't have to actually code in order to develop a software. So that's one misunderstanding that we see every time in the software industry. But coding and programming, I mean, those are the same words, they're the same word. But coding is more technical now. I think coding has been more adopted as a standard, you know, lingua to use, and it's more stylish. You know, coding is more stylish. Coding, what is it? Programming. Okay, programming. There are other industries that use programming. But for example, the TV industry, or what they call it. Yeah, the TV industry, they have their own terminology for program or programming. Printers, I know printers also use the word programming. You want to program something. Okay, so because of that, coding is only being used by the software industry. Coding, you know, we are coders, you understand? So that's the reason why coding has been generally accepted, you know, to be the most palatable, you know, to be the most palatable lingua to use. So I'm trying to go back to this, my slides, but it's just not. Oh, hold on, please. Let me unshare. Let me unshare and reshare my screen. So we're going to be sending you an email after now of the next step after now. The next step, for those of you who are going to be interested in furthering beyond this and going for the full course. Okay, that's the flyer I'm trying to show you. Hold on, please. So you can ask any question you want to ask concerning this, the timing and everything. But we're still going to be sending an email to that effect. Why can't I see this thing? Okay. Please hold on. I have to reopen my slide. Okay. So sharing my screen again. Okay. So I want to believe you can also see my screen right now. So this is the next thing now. The website development course, which we want to show you. Okay. Everything we've taught within these 2 days, they are the foundation of this website development course. As a matter of fact, those who have taken this course, those who have come in to register, and we have some people who have actually started already. Okay. this introduction to coding is where we start from. So whenever anybody comes in fresh, okay, to start this course, to enroll for this course, we first take them through the 2 to 3 days, intro to coding course that you just taken now. By the time we finish taking them, then they are always ready to dive deep into it, and the rate at which they move is always very, very fast. Okay, so this is just to introduce you to the next step, into learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is what is generally called web development. So the acquisition of the skill of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skill qualifies you to become a web developer. So after acquiring the skill, you'll be able to, develop a fully functional website from basic to advanced. Okay, so it's a 3-month course, actually 2 months, but in the third month, you are going to be working on 2 major projects. The first one is a basic project, then the next one is a more advanced project. I mean, we are going to be designing a complex website, and you're going to be deploying the website, okay, to GitHub. So by the time you are done with the course, you will have about 2 projects to your name that you can use, that can become part of the portfolio immediately. And all the skills you will acquire from it, you can, once you are done with the course, we will give you a certificate. But in the IT, the software industry, we all know that certificate doesn't really matter. Nobody will ask for a certificate. Can you design a website? Yes. Show us what you have done before. That's all they want to know. You understand? Can you do this? You understand? If you can, show us. You understand? The interview of software development or software developers is not always very tedious. Why? Because if you say you can do something and they employ you and they find that you can, it won't take up to 1 week before they find that you cannot do it, and they'll start you immediately. You understand? So it's about what you know, not about your certificate or anything. However, because we know that it's standard, for an academy, after people have been trained, you crown them with certificates. So we do that. But what we focus on most important thing is that will allow you build your portfolio. Okay, so one important thing you'll get out from this course is, apart from acquiring the training, we'll also train you on the tools. Some tools you need to do, or you need to understand to start building your portfolio. How you can use LinkedIn, how you can use GitHub. Most of the time when you go for interviews, they'll ask you, send your GitHub URL. So GitHub is a place, is a platform online where people store their codes. Okay, if you build a website now, you store your codes there. So you can now send it to anybody, an employer or anybody who have requested for your website or to see your codes. You understand? Then you can also host it on a server. There are so many free servers that you host your website on. Then you can tell people, I developed it. Okay, and it's a standard website, not all these websites. Standard websites using Bootstrap, HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap framework. And by the time you are done, you'll be able to develop any website of any standard websites. Now, not web app. You have been trained now. You now know the difference between a website and a web app. Okay, so this course will give you the foundation to be able to develop a fully functional professional website. You understand? Then, from immediately after you are done with the course, you can start actually taking website jobs. You can start telling people, yes, I'm a website designer, I designed this, I designed that. Then you can immediately start adding to your stream of income. Okay, you can start it as a side project, but eventually, because like I said earlier, because of the high demand, you will soon not be able to match it with another thing again, such that if you're already working, you might have to resign. You understand? Or it will give you an opportunity to even work in a software company. Okay, because website designers are also sought after in software companies, even just by taking the 3-month course. You understand? So this is what we're introducing to you now, and it's just 150,000 naira. Okay, although for those who attended this training, we have your emails in our database and your numbers and everything. They are going to be eligible. The fact that you register for this free course and you've been trained already, we have added value to you already. So you are no longer the same person you used to be before you took this course. So in recognition of that value, you understand, and just to encourage you to move on to acquire more value, we are giving 10% discount to everyone who partook in this course. 10% off this 150,000 naira, so that you can move on to the next thing and learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, 3 programming languages in one that are required to learn website development. So we're going to be sending an email about this to you, and the course is going to be starting in 1st of March. 1st of March. Okay, so if you have any question regarding this, you can send an email to academy@zelna.com, okay, or call the number on this flyer that we are going to be getting your email. Then we can talk more about it if you are interested in enrolling. So, but I really encourage you, to consolidate on the training. On this training, it's a very, very solid foundation you have gotten. Consolidate on it and move higher and learn something more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hello, sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you for everything so far you've learned. Then, first, I want to ask, is this training virtual or it will be a one-on-one class?
So it's both virtual and physical. Okay, so we have arrangements for those who are not in Lagos. Okay, like some people are on this training, they join from another state. Okay, some are even outside the country. So those who can't be close, who can't.
Okay, that's my number 2 question is can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, then I wanted to ask, yeah, so from the explanation about this course so far and from what you taught us, so basically for the 3, I didn't get the number of months you said it is. For the 3 or 6 months that we're going to learn this, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask that, so it will be like you taught us that it's only front end you're taking us on this, right?
Yeah, so it's not even the full front end, it's web development. Now, front end is much more than web development. Okay, but the foundation to front end, the foundation to both front end and back end is web development. Okay, before you do front end or back end, you must understand web development. So web development is the prerequisite to front end and back end. You understand? So this is the foundation. So when you are now done with this, you can now decide, okay, we'll look at it together. Okay, where do you want to specialize in? Do you want to specialize in front end or do you want to specialize in back end? So by the time you are done with the web development, you yourself will be able to assess your strengths. You'll be able to say, okay, I think I want to start with front end first. There are some parameters you use to judge. We'll show you all those things. You yourself will be able to say, okay, I think I'm best fit for front end, and some will be best fit for back end. You understand? So you can now go for the advanced course after this. That will be the last stage to now specialize in either front end or back end. You understand? But either ways, you have to go through this. It is very, very important.
Okay, so my last question, sir.
Okay, I can hear you.
Right.
I can hear you.
For example, like me, I'm a student.
Okay.
I'm working class, but right, because of Corona, I've no work and all that.
Okay.
So how do you say you subsidize this? Understanding the fact that this is a very short notice to raise this kind of money. To be honest, I really don't have this money right now. I don't even have a dime in my account right now because I'm not working at the moment. I'm actually looking for a job. But what I want to ask is there flexibility in the payment, in this payment?
Yes. Especially for students, there's flexibility, so you can just send an email, to us, academy@zelna.com. So we'll contact you, we'll reach out to you, then we'll give you the details of the flexibility payment.
All right, sir. No problem. That's all I want to do. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. So thank you, everyone. In case there's any more questions, please send an email to us. We'll answer all the questions. So an email of everything is going to be sent to you very soon, so that you can, you can go over it again and again. Okay. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining this training. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
see you some other time.
Bye.